Hi, my name's Greta. My water broke in the passenger seat, and my husband looked me in the eye and said, "Get out, you'll dirty the car." He left me there, on the pavement, while his parents watched from the back seat and said nothing. They went on a family vacation. I went into labor, alone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came after, when they tried to take my baby. When they said I was unstable, unfit, when the people who left me bleeding on concrete claimed they were the victims, so I did something they didn't expect. I let the world see what they did. Would you like to know what happened next? I didn't know then that everything I was silent about would one day explode inside a parking lot. It started long before the day Brannon kicked me out of that car. Long before I was gasping for air on that pavement, soaked and shaking. It started with a phone call and a family in panic. Cressida backed out of her engagement 3 weeks before the wedding. "She's overwhelmed," my mother whispered, like it was a sickness we didn't name aloud. The invitations had gone out. The deposit on the reception hall was non-refundable, and Brannon, he wasn't just a fiancé, he was a solution, to my mother at least. "We need to protect the family's name," she told me that evening. "It's a simple ceremony. Everyone knows Brannon. It won't feel that different." I remember the way her hands trembled as she sliced peaches for the cobbler, her voice too calm. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and denial. "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm saying, this could be good for you. You've always been the practical one, Greta. You don't chase after dreams like Cressida. You handle things." That was how I became a bride in someone else's love story. Brannon and I met for coffee the next day. He was polite, still wore the ring Cressida had chosen for him. He didn't apologize, didn't ask if I was okay with any of it. Just said, "Let's not make this worse. It's already embarrassing for your family." I nodded because I was raised to keep the peace, not ask questions, especially when the family name was involved. 3 days later, I was at the tailor with Isolde, my mother, getting Cressida's dress altered. It was a sleeveless satin A-line, more glamorous than anything I'd ever wear, but no one asked me what I liked. They just shortened it, took in the waist, and clipped the veil to my head like I was one of those mannequins at Macy's. My sister never called, not once. At the backyard wedding, the sky was too bright. The folding chairs were uneven on the grass, and the sound system crackled when the officiant began. Brannon stood like a statue, nodding only once as I walked toward him, alone. My father claimed his arthritis was flaring up. "Too painful to stand that long," he said. I knew it was something else. No vows, no kiss, no dancing. Just a rushed exchange of rings, followed by a dinner of cold chicken and 2 warm wine. Isolde pulled me aside before dessert. Her voice was low, but her grip on my arm was strong. "You did the right thing," she said. "You saved us all." No one toasted the bride. That night, in the guest bedroom at Brannon's parents' house, our honeymoon suite, as Vera, his mother, had awkwardly joked, I sat on the edge of the bed in a dress that didn't belong to me and wondered how I became the answer to a problem I never caused. I didn't cry. Crying would have made it feel more real. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, veil off, hair collapsing, and told myself it was a chance, a second-place ribbon in a race I never signed up for. But maybe I could still win something. Maybe Brannon and I could make it work. Maybe, if I was enough of a wife, he'd learn to see me. Maybe my mother was right, that I was the manageable one. Cressida was the sun. I was the shade that made everyone comfortable. The next morning, Brannon made coffee, didn't ask how I slept, and left the house without saying goodbye. His mother offered me leftover cake and asked if I planned on returning to work soon. "No point wasting your degree," she said. That was day 1 of my marriage. I spent it ironing his shirts and calling the electric company to set up our new billing address. I told myself it was normal, that marriages began all sorts of strange ways, that love could follow logic, that affection could grow like ivy on a brick wall if you gave it enough time. But underneath all of that wishful thinking was a silence so loud it filled every corner of that rented duplex we moved into. Every dinner where he stared at his phone, every conversation that ended before it began. Still, I believed I could build something out of nothing, that patience and presence were enough. I gave him everything I had, every dinner, every compromise, every swallowed question. And it never occurred to me, not once in those first few months, that this silence would someday rupture into something violent and public. But it would, and when it did, it would start with a sentence I'll never forget. Get out. You'll dirty the car. It didn't happen all at once, of course. That kind of fracture takes time to form. Long, stretched-out moments where you tell yourself it's not that bad, where you brush off pain as part of the package and silence as sacrifice. The first snow had fallen that morning, thin, barely clinging to the edges of the sidewalks, as if it too wasn't sure it belonged here yet. I stood in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of decaf, watching the sky through the window as I tried to ignore the weight in my lower back. My due date was 2 weeks away, and everything hurt. Brannon came down the stairs with his usual stiffness. He never moved quietly. He stomped, as if the floor owed him something. He didn't glance at me. Just reached for his thermos and muttered, "You forgot to add creamer yesterday." I blinked. "Sorry, I'll make sure it's in today." "You always say that." He walked out the door without so much as a goodbye. I stood there for another few minutes, letting the silence settle, then made his eggs anyway. I knew he'd come back for them. He always did. He liked routines, even if they came with resentment. By the time he returned, scarf half-tied and irritation already simmering in his jawline, I had the plate on the table. He didn't say thank you. He never did. I spent the rest of the morning folding laundry on the couch, resting between loads, feeling my body protest every move. The kicks were stronger now, little jabs that made my breath hitch. I texted my OB and asked if that level of cramping was normal. She told me to come in the next day. That afternoon, I dragged myself to the store to pick up groceries. Vera had invited some church friend over for dinner. She hadn't asked if I was up for hosting. She'd simply called that morning and said, "Don't forget, Donna doesn't eat pork, and please make your spinach dip. She loves it." There was no discussion. No concern about whether I could even stand on my feet that long. Just expectations layered in politeness and veiled commands. I went. I always went. The checkout line was long, and I remember leaning slightly on the cart, shifting my weight to ease the ache in my hips. A young cashier smiled at me as I paid. "Almost there, huh?" she said, nodding at my belly. "Yeah," I said, managing a smile back. "Almost." When I got home, Vera was already in the kitchen, inspecting the dishes I had prepped. "You're using frozen spinach?" she said, lifting the bag with her fingertips like it might stain her. "You know it's just not the same. I always use fresh." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. "I can run back out," I offered, though every part of me screamed no. She sighed like a martyr. "No, it's fine. I just hope Donna doesn't notice." As she left the room, I rested my hands on the edge of the counter, closed my eyes, and let the dizziness wash over me in private. Dinner went how dinners always did. Brannon stayed on his phone. Vera took credit for every bite that Donna enjoyed. I was asked 3 times if I was planning to lose the baby weight quickly. "You're so petite, you won't want to hang on to that." I smiled, nodded, cleared plates, carried hot pans with dish towels instead of oven mitts because the drawer stuck and no one bothered to help me open it. At one point, I burned my palm slightly on the lid of the soup pot. The skin turned red instantly. No one noticed. Later that night, when the guests had gone and Vera was bragging about Donna's compliments on her lovely home cooking, I excused myself and went out onto the porch. The cold bit at my ankles where my pants didn't quite reach. I sat down on the steps slowly, one hand on my belly. The wind stirred the leaves in the gutter, and for the first time in a while, I let my mind wander. Is this what being a mother means? Is this what love looks like? No soft words. No gentle hands. Just expectations and thankless hours. Just pain, masked by the phrase, "It's what women do." I didn't cry. I couldn't have, even if I wanted to. I was too tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, but the kind that sits in your bones and tells you no one is coming, that the life you're building inside you is the only thing keeping you from disappearing entirely. I heard the door creak behind me. Brannon stepped out, looked at me like I was a lawn ornament left out of place. "What are you doing out here? It's freezing." "I needed air." He sighed, like that was a problem I'd created for him. "You could have at least cleaned the kitchen first." He turned back inside before I could respond. I stayed outside a little longer, watching the frost bloom on the porch railing, hand resting on my belly like it was the only thing still tethering me to this world. And that's when I realized, even when I carry life, they still see me as disposable. The shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with a scream or some grand realization. It came in quiet resignation as I closed the back door behind me and sat down at the kitchen table. My fingers traced circles on the worn wood, the same table where I'd folded Brannon's shirts, signed bills, scribbled grocery lists. That night, I rested my hand on my belly and told myself not to expect anything anymore. The next morning, Vera called before I'd finished brushing my teeth. "Don't forget," she said, "we're doing Brannon's birthday dinner at your place this year. He always feels more at home there." She didn't ask, just stated it like fact, the way people do when they've decided for you. "I haven't had a chance to shop yet," I said, toothbrush still in hand. "Well, you better get to it. He deserves something nice. Make that stew he likes." Click. By the time I hung up, the list in my mind had already formed. Meat, potatoes, broth, rolls, candles for the table, streamers for the wall. I was nearly full term, but no one seemed to think that meant anything should slow down. Maybe I didn't either, not fully. I spent the afternoon at the grocery store, pushing the cart slowly down the aisles. Every step sent a pulse through my lower back, but I kept moving. I bought the things he liked, the snacks his father always reached for, the tea Vera pretended not to drink but always finished. My body ached, but my brain just kept saying, "Make it beautiful. Maybe this time they'll see you tried." Back home, I stood over the stove, stirring, chopping, lifting. I changed out of my sweatshirt into a navy blue dress Vera once said was almost flattering, and I curled my hair the best I could with the mirror fogged over. By the time Brannon walked through the door, my feet were swollen and I was blinking through dizziness, but I managed to smile. "Happy birthday." He nodded, walked past me, and dropped his keys on the entryway table. "Did you remember the garlic rolls?" "I did." "Good." It wasn't long before the doorbell rang. Vera entered first, adjusting her coat with a flourish like she was stepping onto a stage. Walter followed, arms full of wine and conversation about property taxes. Vera immediately walked into the dining room and began moving things around. "Let's not do candles," she said, sliding them aside. "Brannon likes it simpler." I held my breath. I'd picked those candles because they were his favorite color when we were dating, back when he still cared enough to have favorite things. Walter commented on Cressida's newest article, just published in some academic journal. Brannon chimed in with pride. She always had the mind for writing. No one asked how I was feeling. No one mentioned the food. When dinner was finally served, Vera took one bite of the stew and smiled. "I taught her that," she said. "Same recipe I used for Brannon's third-grade bake-off." Brannon raised his glass. "To my mom, for raising me right and teaching me what home should feel like." There it was, a toast. But not for me. I stared down at my hands, fingers trembling slightly. The burn from the pot lid was still pink across my palm. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a sip of water, hoping it would wash down whatever was rising. That's when the door opened again. Cressida walked in, late as always, dressed in one of those flowing coats that made it seem like she'd just come from something important, probably had. "Sorry," she said breezily, kissing the air near Vera's cheek. "Traffic was brutal." She glanced at the table, then at me. "Oh, Greta made dinner. She's always been the artsy one, huh? Not exactly the domestic type." She laughed like it was a compliment. No one corrected her. Vera smiled indulgently. "She means well." Isolde's voice floated in from the speakerphone. Brannon had put her on a call earlier. "She's not like Cressida," she said. "But she does try." That was enough. I stood up, muttered something about needing the restroom, and slipped away. In the hallway, the noise faded behind the closed door. I gripped the sink, leaned forward, and took 3 slow breaths. I didn't want to cry, not because I was strong, but because I was afraid if I started, I wouldn't stop. I looked at myself in the mirror. The curls in my hair had fallen flat. My dress clung too tightly. My eyes were tired. I had cooked the meal. I had set the table. I had burned my hand. And still, I was just a placeholder. Their praise floated past me like I was a piece of furniture. Their words carved out the last bit of space I had left to believe this family might ever see me. I stayed in that bathroom longer than I needed to, listening to the laughter, the clinking glasses, the sound of my own breath. That night, lying on my side in bed while Brannon snored beside me, I rested a hand on my belly and whispered to the baby I hadn't yet met. They don't see me, but I see you, and that's going to have to be enough. 3 days before my due date, Brannon walked into the kitchen without even looking at me and said, "Pack a bag. We're going to my parents' house for the weekend." He said it like I wasn't standing there, like I was a child he was speaking over. I was folding baby onesies on the counter, sorting them by size, by color, by hope. I turned slowly, my lower back screaming after 30 minutes on my feet. "My due date is this week," I reminded him, gently but firmly. He grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl, peeled it with one hand. So? So it's not a good idea to travel. It's risky. I have a checkup tomorrow." He shook his head, already walking out of the room. "You're not sick, Greta. You're pregnant. You're not made of glass." The conversation ended, like most things with Brannon, without resolution. Just a door shutting, a car starting. By midday, I was in the passenger seat, gripping a thermos of lukewarm peppermint tea, watching the neighborhood roll by. Vera had texted earlier. "Can't wait to see you both." Brannon said, "You're nesting like a pro." The ride was silent except for the rhythmic clicking of his blinker as we approached the main road. I shifted in my seat, trying to get comfortable, but a strange cramping had started in my abdomen. It wasn't the usual tightness. I knew that pattern by now. This was different, sharper, deeper. I pressed a hand to my belly. The baby kicked. Once, then twice. Then, pressure. I took a breath. "Brannon?" He kept his eyes on the road. "What now?" "I think my water just broke." A beat of silence, then a long, frustrated sigh. "You're kidding." "I'm not." Without another word, he took the next exit, pulling into the parking lot of a strip mall where there was a grocery store, a gas station, and a payday loan place. He parked, left the engine running. I turned toward him, confused. "What are we doing here? We need to go to the hospital." He looked at the passenger seat, then down at my lap. "You're leaking all over the seat." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, he unbuckled his seatbelt and got out. He walked around to my door and yanked it open. "Get out." I blinked, stunned. "What?" "You heard me. Get out. You're going to ruin the interior." I can't walk. I need help." He reached in and nudged my leg with his foot. "Don't make this a scene." My legs gave out as I tried to pivot. The edge of the seat pressed into my lower back. I gripped the doorframe with both hands. Pain was radiating through my abdomen now, and my vision blurred. I felt moisture running down my thighs. Then he kicked my foot, just hard enough to knock it off the mat. I slid out, hitting the pavement knees first. My hands splayed out instinctively, catching some of the fall, but the impact sent shock through my spine. I gasped, my entire body contracting. My knees scraped on the cold, grimy concrete. The smell of car exhaust and asphalt filled my nose. Behind me, Brannon muttered something under his breath, something I was too disoriented to hear. The car door slammed. The engine revved. I watched the taillights disappear as the sedan pulled away. He didn't even look back. Neither did the people in the back seat, his parents who had been silent the entire time. I don't know how long I lay there, shivering on the asphalt. The sun was high, but the wind made everything sharp. I tried to reach for my phone, which had fallen from my coat pocket and landed just inches beyond my reach. My fingers were swollen, stiff. I clawed forward, finally grabbing it and dialing 911 with the last ounce of clarity I had. "My name is Greta," I told the dispatcher. I'm pregnant. I think I'm in labor. My husband just left me in a parking lot. The dispatcher kept me talking, asked if I could see any signs, any businesses. I read off the name of the grocery store. She said help was on the way. Someone crouched beside me. Someone I didn't know. Ma'am, are you okay? She had kind eyes and a warm scarf. She pressed a hand to my shoulder. I called for help too, she said. You're not alone. The ambulance arrived a few minutes later. The paramedics asked me questions. How far along, when the contractions started, did I have any known complications? I answered as best I could while they lifted me onto the stretcher. Inside the vehicle, wrapped in a heated blanket, I stared at the ceiling as the sirens wailed overhead. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because the shock had wrapped itself around me like a shell. I was floating above myself, watching this woman, this version of me, being carried away from a man who saw her as furniture, as inconvenience, as excess weight. The paramedic looked down and gave me a soft smile. You're doing great, ma'am. Just hang in there. You're not alone anymore. I closed my eyes. Let that sentence wash over me. Let it break something open in my chest. Because he was right. I wasn't alone anymore. And I'd never be that woman again. The hospital room was too quiet, not the peaceful kind either. It was the kind of quiet that hums beneath fluorescent lights and settles in your chest like a cold you can't shake. My son lay in a clear bassinet beside me, swaddled tightly, sleeping through the noise of the nurses outside. I hadn't slept much. The adrenaline from the delivery had long faded, replaced by the soreness that lived in every inch of my body. My arms felt heavy. My lower back pulsed with dull pain. But more than that, my mind wouldn't stop running. It kept circling around what had happened, how I got here, not just the parking lot, not just the ambulance, but everything before it, all the small cuts that led to the deep wound. My parents arrived just after sunrise. My mother walked in with a grocery bag of snacks and apples. My dad trailed behind, holding a bouquet from a gas station, the price tag still stuck to the plastic. They looked tired, older than I remembered. Or maybe I just hadn't looked closely in a while. We came as soon as we could, Isolde said, placing the bag on the windowsill. Your brother needed the car last night, or we would have been here. I nodded. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I didn't have the energy for anger. My father stood near the door, shifting from one foot to the other. He glanced at the baby, then at me, then at the floor. Glad you're okay, he murmured. They stayed 15 minutes, maybe 20. Long enough for my mother to comment on the color of the baby's hair, long enough for my father to say we should get the ceiling in the guest room looked at. It's starting to bubble again. Then they were gone. It wasn't until after they left that my phone buzzed. The first message came in at 10:47 a.m. Brannon, so now I'm the villain. I work non-stop, and you play the martyr. I stared at it, unblinking. I hadn't heard a word from him since he drove off and left me in a parking lot, doubled over and bleeding into my jeans. Another message followed. Brannon, it's not my fault you couldn't keep it together. You always act like you're some saint. My hand tightened around the phone, not out of shock, because truthfully, I wasn't surprised, but from something older, something deeper, rage. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't even pretending to be sorry. He was blaming me. Again. Like when I forgot to defrost chicken 2 months ago, and he said I was sabotaging his meals. Like when I cried during our first anniversary dinner, and he accused me of ruining the night with drama. Like when I got dizzy walking home from work in the heat, and he asked if I even drank water like an adult. He always needed a target. And I'd always let him use me. I scrolled. Another message came through. Brannon, I told my mom everything. She agrees you were acting unstable. That did it. I opened the keyboard, my thumbs hovering over the screen. For a second, I hesitated. The old version of me would have deleted the draft, taken a deep breath, and walked away. But that version of me had been left on the asphalt 3 days ago. I typed, me. Say one more word like that. I'll reply in court, not text. I hit send. Then I put the phone down. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I looked at my baby, my son, and thought, you will never grow up thinking this is normal. You will never learn love from someone who uses silence as a leash. The door creaked. My mother walked back in, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. She looked at the expression on my face and paused. What happened? I told her. About the messages. About what I sent back. She sat down beside me, slowly. Maybe, she began, choosing her words, maybe you should just let this go. It's a messy situation. Maybe you don't want to make it worse. I turned my head toward her, not with fire, but with calm steel. I'm not starting a war, Mom. I'm ending one. One that's been choking me for years. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she nodded. After she left, I stared at the ceiling for a while. Then I picked up my phone again, not to read his messages, but to open another thread. Me, to Delara. Is the offer still open? I need legal protection. For me and my son. The reply came almost instantly. Delara. Yes, I've already started drafting. Let's talk. And that was the moment it shifted for good. I wasn't asking for fairness anymore. I was preparing for justice. By the time Delara walked into my hospital room, it had been nearly 48 hours since I gave birth. I was exhausted, still swollen, but focused in a way I hadn't been in years. My baby boy slept peacefully in the bassinet beside me, unaware of the world he'd been born into, or the storm building just outside its walls. Delara closed the door behind her, took off her coat, and gave me a long, measured look. In her hand was a tablet. No flowers, no balloons, just evidence. There's more than just your words now, she said, sitting beside my bed. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to brace for. She tapped the screen and turned it toward me. There's a residential camera on the building across from that parking lot, she explained. The owner saw what happened, downloaded the footage, and sent it to a friend. That friend sent it to me. I leaned forward slowly, careful not to wake the baby. The video played, and within seconds, I felt the air tighten in my chest. There I was, on screen, visibly in pain, my hands gripping the car door as Brannon circled around, expression cold, lips barely moving. Then came the words. I couldn't hear them, but I remembered them word for word. Get out. You'll dirty the car. And then, the part I hadn't fully processed until now. The kick, not a full-force assault. Just enough to shove, to humiliate, to send a message. I watched myself stumble onto the ground, hands catching pavement, knees hitting hard. The video ended with his car pulling away, no one in the vehicle glancing back. Delara didn't speak for a moment. She didn't need to. The silence in the room now had purpose. Your parents are on their way, she finally said. They should see this too. A few minutes later, the door opened. My mother entered first, followed by my father, who had never been particularly expressive, but now looked like someone who had aged 10 years in 2 days. Delara pressed play again. I didn't watch them while the footage rolled. I kept my eyes on the sleeping infant beside me, one hand resting lightly on his blanket. When it ended, there was a long, awful pause. My mother's voice broke first. I didn't know it was this bad. I turned to her. You didn't want to know. She winced, like the words had more weight than I'd meant them to carry. Maybe they did. Maybe they were overdue. My father stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on the now dark screen. He's not walking away from this, he said, voice low and even. Not a damn chance. Delara nodded. We'll file immediately. Assault. Endangerment. Emotional and physical abuse. And if the company he works for has any values, they'll deal with him separately. My mom looked at Delara, unsure. Will this go public? It might, Delara replied. We won't be the ones to leak it, but it's out there. That camera belonged to someone who already shared it with neighbors. I let that sink in. The humiliation, the betrayal, it wasn't just mine anymore. It had witnesses. It had weight. That night, after my parents left and the baby drifted back to sleep, I received the first voicemail. Brannon's voice, shaky, pretending to be calm. Greta, this is getting blown way out of proportion. You know I didn't mean it like that. You were panicking. I panicked. That video doesn't show everything. I didn't respond. The next morning, another voicemail. You're ruining my life. My job's on the line. You're making me look like a monster. Then a third. We should talk. Just us. No lawyers. Please. We were good once, weren't we? I played them all for Dilara that afternoon. She listened without flinching. Should I block him? I asked. No, she said. Let him keep digging. So I saved them all. Every call, every desperate message, every attempt to gaslight me one last time. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't even feel rage anymore. I felt clarity, purpose. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Not just for me, but for the person I used to be. For the person I never got to become. I looked at my son, and something settled in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next, because I was done hiding. The next morning began like most days in the hospital. Routine checks, quiet beeping monitors, the soft hum of nurses' sneakers on the linoleum. My son slept beside me, wrapped in that same pale blue blanket, breathing in that new, uneven rhythm newborns have. It was peaceful on the outside, but inside me, something sharp had started to harden. Dilara arrived just after breakfast. She didn't knock, she never did, and I appreciated that more than I could say. She carried her bag over one shoulder and a small envelope in her hand. We've got something, she said, already pulling her phone from her pocket. One of my contacts got a hold of a recorded conversation between Brannon and his parents. They were careless. I sat up slowly, adjusting the pillows behind me. Careless how? She tapped her screen, then handed me the phone. The audio started with Vera's unmistakable tone, tight, controlled, always coated in that fake sweetness. If she files for custody, we'll push for emotional instability, Vera said. No one wants to give a newborn to a woman who has meltdowns in public. Then Brannon. We'll say she abandoned the baby emotionally. The hospital report won't show she was stable. Who's going to prove otherwise? My hands didn't shake. Not this time. They left me in a parking lot, I said. And now they want to take my child. Dilara nodded. And this is enough to turn every judge in the county against them. I didn't hesitate. I pulled up Brannon's contact and called. He answered on the second ring. Greta? I heard the recording, I said flatly. You and your mother planning to lie to take our son. There was a pause. Then he said, You don't want to do this. You'll make it ugly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. There's already a video of you kicking your pregnant wife. The world has already picked a side. You wouldn't dare drag this through court. Watch me. Then I hung up. By late afternoon, the video had spread. I wasn't sure how it got out, maybe through the neighbor, maybe through a leak from the footage we'd submitted. But suddenly, people were messaging me, tagging me in posts, resharing the clip across every platform imaginable. Within 24 hours, hashtags were trending. #Justice for Greta. #Stand with her. She deserved better. News segments ran the story with blurred footage and quiet outrage. By the next day, Brannon's company released a statement saying he'd been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending investigation. He called me 4 times that night. I didn't answer. Instead, I met with Dilara and her legal team. We gathered everything: voice memos, the security video, medical records, even printed screenshots of every message Brannon had sent me after the hospital. When Walter reached out and asked if we could talk things through like family, I didn't bother replying. Instead, I passed the message to Dilara. He was there in the back seat, I told her. He saw me collapse and said nothing. That's the only conversation I need. She nodded and didn't press me further. That evening, I sat alone at the window, my baby sleeping across the room in a crib they'd rolled in earlier that day. I picked up the journal I hadn't touched since before the birth. I stared at the blank page for a long time, then finally began to write. One day, I wrote, you'll ask me where your father went, and I'll tell you gently that he chose not to stay. Not when it mattered, not when it counted, but we stayed. You and me? And we made a new story. I closed the journal and rested my hand on my son's back. He stirred slightly under my palm, then stilled again. Let them come for me, I whispered to myself. This time, I'm ready, with the truth, the proof, and the rage they fed. 2 weeks after giving birth, I walked into the Aurora County Courthouse wearing a blouse that still smelled faintly of baby lotion and coffee. It was early, the air sharp with leftover winter chill, and the sky hung low with clouds, the kind that looked heavy with judgment. I held my head high, but my palms were damp and my heart beat in a quiet, steady thud I could feel in my ears. Delara walked beside me, her steps measured, confident. She wore a navy suit that didn't need introduction, didn't demand respect, it just expected it. I'd seen her in jeans and a cardigan, sipping herbal tea at my kitchen table. But this was not the woman who brought me homemade soup. This was the one who read depositions for breakfast. We stepped past the reporters, their murmurs low at first, then louder when someone whispered my name. There she is. That's her. Greta, from the parking lot video. That video. The one shared over 4 million times now. The one where I'd been kicked out of a car in labor by a man who still claimed to love me. The one the world hadn't stopped watching. Inside, the courtroom was cooler than I expected. Rows of pew-like benches stretched behind us, mostly empty except for a few quiet spectators and media reps. A woman 2 rows back made eye contact with me, then gave the smallest nod. I didn't recognize her, but I recognized her look. She knew this fight. Brannon was already seated at the defendant's table, flanked by a lawyer in an ill-fitting suit and his ever-expressive mother, Vera, perched on the edge of the bench as though her disapproval alone might tilt the scales of justice. Delara leaned toward me before we sat. Let them posture. They can't undo facts. The judge entered. We stood, then sat in unison. The clerk read the case details, her voice crisp and devoid of any emotion. And then it began. First, Delara addressed the court with the same calm cadence she used when ordering tea. Your Honor, my client has endured sustained emotional, physical, and psychological abuse during a high-risk pregnancy. We will present video evidence, authenticated by timestamp and origin. We will present medical records, signed statements, and text communications from the defendant. We will also introduce the presence of coercive behavior that spans over 2 years, culminating in a life-threatening abandonment. Brannon's lawyer objected to her involvement, citing a conflict of interest. Delara didn't blink. I'm not just her legal representative, she said. I'm also executive counsel on the board that recently suspended Mr. Brannon's employment for misconduct pending review. We take abuse allegations seriously. The courtroom gasped. Brannon turned pale, his jaw tightening. The judge nodded. Objection overruled. Then came the footage. Delara played the video with no dramatics, just a screen lit up beside the bench, showing me standing by the car, clutching my belly, lips moving, pleading. Then Brannon's face, his hand, his foot, my body hitting the pavement. I didn't look away. Not this time. I watched it all again with the same detachment I had in the ambulance and the same fire I'd carried every day since. Delara didn't stop there. She read his texts aloud. You'll ruin me. You're making me look like a monster. It's your fault for making me angry. Then the medical records, the paramedic statement, and finally, a written testimony from the woman who had knelt beside me that day and held my hand until help arrived. Brannon's lawyer tried to object again, but the judge was already writing notes. Brannon stood, face flushed, and said, It wasn't like that. She's exaggerating. You don't know what she was like behind closed doors. My career. The judge held up a hand. Mr. Brannon, this courtroom is not concerned with your employment. It is concerned with your conduct. Sit down. He did. Then came the ruling. Full legal custody to me. Restraining order granted. Emergency motion to bar unsupervised visitation. Approved. Delara closed her folder with a quiet click. Outside, as we walked down the courthouse steps, the crowd gathered. Reporters asked questions I didn't answer. A woman held out her phone for a selfie. I shook my head, gently. Someone shouted, "What would you say to him now?" I paused, turned slightly. "He said I'd ruin him," I said, voice steady. "I didn't. He did that to himself." The murmur stopped. Cameras clicked, but I kept walking. I didn't win because I screamed louder. I won because I never let them silence me again. The quiet in my apartment now wasn't the kind that haunted me. It wasn't the echo of being ignored or the dread of a slammed door. This was the kind that whispered comfort, the kind that let me hear my son's soft breaths while I stood at the kitchen counter, slowly stirring oatmeal in a small pot. It had been 3 months since the ruling. I'd moved into this place a week after the court hearing. A modest 2-bedroom with old wood floors and thin windows, but it was mine. Ours. I'd painted the nursery walls pale green during those first evenings, with the baby monitor clipped to my waistband and a step stool I should have thrown away years ago. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a part of myself. Silence used to feel like suffocation. Now it sounded like a pan sizzling on the stove, the washing machine rumbling, the baby's laugh as he tried to reach for the dog-eared plush elephant beside his crib. That morning, I opened the mailbox and found a thick envelope with a return address I recognized immediately. Brannon's lawyer. I stood on the doormat, the baby strapped against my chest, and opened it with one hand. Inside was a formal letter, a page of legal updates. Brannon had officially been terminated from his job. The board had completed their internal investigation and found the video to be incompatible with company standards. There was also a paragraph about a pending review from the district attorney's office regarding spousal assault. Attached was a handwritten note. "Greta, I want to talk, not as enemies, just two people who have history. I deserve a chance to explain. Please." No name at the bottom, just that line. I folded it back into the envelope and slid it into the junk drawer without a second thought. I didn't need his pain to feel peace. I didn't need his apology to move forward. That afternoon, I sat with my laptop open at the kitchen table. The baby napped in his bassinet nearby, a pacifier shifting gently with each breath. The cursor blinked against a blank document until I finally started typing. The day I was kicked out of the car and into myself. The title made me pause. I didn't rewrite it. I wrote for hours. I wrote about the silence, the shame, the slow unraveling. I wrote about the subtle digs at dinner tables, the nights I cleaned up messes I didn't make, the way my body carried life while my husband carried nothing but pride. I wrote the story I had buried under layers of justification for years, and when I was done, I hit submit. The next morning, it was published on a site for women's voices and survivor stories. By evening, I had over 300 comments. By the end of the week, thousands. I see you. I was you. I left after 20 years. Thank you for saying what I never could. My daughter sent me this. I think she's trying to tell me something. I didn't reply to every message, but I read each one. Let them settle. Let them remind me that what happened to me wasn't a private shame. It was part of a pattern that needed to be seen. One Thursday, Delara dropped by unannounced. She brought a small bouquet of tulips and a pack of diapers. No briefcase this time. We sat on the porch while the baby slept inside. "I don't know how to thank you," I said finally, setting my tea aside. Delara shook her head. "Don't. No, really. You didn't just represent me. You stood beside me when I didn't even believe I was worth standing beside." She let the silence sit for a few moments before answering. "I didn't save you, Greta. I gave you the chance to save yourself. That's always the point." We didn't say much else, just watched the breeze stir the neighbor's wind chimes and listen to the rhythm of something new settling into our bones. That night, after I put the baby down, I logged into my blog. I hadn't updated it since the week after the court ruling. I typed, "I'm not fully healed. Some nights, I still wake up and expect to hear keys in the door that no longer opens. Some mornings, I look at the empty side of the bed and feel a strange relief, wrapped in something that still aches. But I'm healing. In small ways, in quiet choices, in the laughter of my child, in the meals I make without needing anyone to say thank you, in the silence I no longer fear. I don't carry scars anymore. I carry roots. Some scars don't show, but they shape everything we become. Greta's story isn't just about a broken marriage, it's about reclaiming your voice, even after years of silence. What would you do if your family tried to erase your pain? If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true-life revenge stories and powerful tales of resilience.